So COVID-19 has just about everyone working from home these days. And if you're a coach, it's possible that you've been working from home a while. A lot of coaches have been making that transition over the last few years. But if you're a leadership coach or an executive coach, it's most likely that the people that you were coaching were coming from an office or somewhere a little more private, and now they're working from home. So I wanted to dig in a little bit to that topic of working with people who are working from home and how you as a coach can help with that process. So I brought on two guests today to talk about this topic. And the first one is my cat, Tiger, because he decided I'm working from home. He's got to show up in the call. So perhaps we'll talk about pets later on in this call. But my real guest today is David Raybould, and he is a PCC. He is a leadership coach and the founder of Next Level Leader, and he's been working from home, and he's made that transition to mostly virtual work over the past couple of years. But his clients, like I said, they've been mostly in offices, and now making that transition to coaching people who are working from home. He's got a lot of tips for us today. And so we've talked about a few of these, and we're just going to go through them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the things that you should be thinking about as a coach when you're transitioning and having clients that are working from home right now. So David, thank you so much for joining.
Pleasure to be here. Yeah, delighted to talk about this topic.
So David, you had a number of great ideas to share here. So let's just start with your first idea, fresh from the top.
I guess I wanted to give a little bit of ideas around how you can approach it when your clients suddenly have a million more distractions, and it's much harder for them to get into the right mindset around their work because they've got their family, they've got their kids, might have dogs or pets in the background, all of which have come into calls in the last week or so that I've had with clients.
Or you've got pets that show up in the foreground, or kids that show up in the foreground too. Oh,
I've had all of those things happen, yes. And so therefore that poses some unique challenges around how you structure the relationship with them and how you have the conversations with them, really. And the first thing's really around how you create agreements. Clear agreements form the foundation of any powerful coaching relationship. If you have weak agreements, then you can't have a powerful coaching relationship. So really setting agreements that are relative to the situation. So if they have kids around, what do they want? How do they need to manage that? If they've got animals around, if they're a single parent and they've got a 4-year-old who decides that he wants to cut something with sharp scissors halfway through a call, like how are you going to navigate those kinds of situations? So it's really around setting those agreements and having a verbal conversation around what is and isn't okay, so that you both know where the bounds are.
Let's throw in a quick example. So I guess, I've got the cat that jumped up in my lap. What does it look like, just quickly, in terms of what would the conversation look like as you're saying, okay, well, you're working from home. What does that conversation look like about creating those agreements? Maybe just give us a quick example.
One of the things that's really important for our coaching relationship is to ensure that we're both clear around what is and isn't okay in our conversations. So how do you want to be around the fact that you've got all of these distractions in your house right now?
Okay, great. And I think I've got a new distraction.
And then we would explore what we want the parameters to be. And I would describe what's generally works well. They would describe what their needs and requirements are. Sometimes they have to, if they shut their dog out of the room, it starts barking. Sometimes if they've got a 4-year-old and they're a single parent, like they have to keep an eye on them. So there's like all of these things which you have to set your expectations relative to their situation, as opposed to when they're in the office, they show up on time, they've got quiet, there's no distractions, there's no excuses.
Great. Well, I think that's a great transition. And I like the way you said, you used the term weak agreements, because you're about to go to your second point, which is more about loose agreements, which is not necessarily a weak agreement. So let's talk about that. Explain what you mean by loose agreements.
What I mean by loosen agreements is to loosen your hold on some of the agreements that you might have set. I'm a real stickler for timekeeping. It really annoys me when people are late, and I really don't tolerate it, which means that I create a very clear agreement with clients around timekeeping. The expectation is that they'll be on time, they'll show up prepared as best as they can, And we also agree that emergencies happen, and they can change and reschedule if they have to, right? And communicate with me around those things. And that's kind of like one of the basics. However, when they're working from home, it's really important that we understand that their circumstances are different. They're not in work mode in exactly the same way. Sometimes a little bit harder to show up exactly on time. So I just kind of like loosen and obviously within reason. We don't want to get them to a point where they're just generally just being sloppy or lazy in how they show up for our conversations, because they won't get benefit. But at the same time, they need to understand that their circumstances are very different. And yes, they might have two screaming teenagers or a 4-year-old who wants to do arts and crafts, right at the beginning of a session. So yeah, just really just understand their challenges, maybe bring a bit more compassion, understanding, and also curiosity as well as to what their challenges might be in their current situation.
That actually brings us to a nice transition into the next talk, your next point, which was about resourcefulness, because they're going to be called on to be resourceful in new ways now, but also just in, resourcefulness, I think, is a great quality of a leader. So talk to us about what you mean about trusting in their resourcefulness.
So one of the kind of sort of fundamental beliefs around coaching is that clients are resourceful, that they are able to find and solve their problems, basically. They have an innate ability to understand what they need to do, and it's not my job. I don't have to rescue them, basically, and tell them how to overcome these situations. Like if you have a single mum at home and she's got a 4-year-old and she's struggling to manage that, then again, I trust in her ability to find solutions to the challenges. So really, it's a kind of energetic exchange. I'm not thinking that this person needs my help. They're perfectly okay. They're doing great. She has a high-profile job. She's managing that high-profile job to the best of her ability. She doesn't need me to step in and suddenly come up with solutions for her. And that really changes the energetic exchange that happens in a coaching relationship. And if I get too tied, or some of the things I've seen coaches do is they get too tied up in trying to help. And if you try to help, that can weaken the boundaries, and that can make for quite a messy coaching relationship and diminish the impact of the coaching.
Yeah, you just reminded me of something. I work with Janet Harvey. A number of people might be familiar with her name. She's an MCC coach, and she was talking about recently when dealing with the COVID issue that these clients of yours are just as resourceful. They're really they're smart people. They're accomplished people, and they're still that same person. It's just the circumstances around them have changed. So how do you help them kind of bring that to the forefront and remember that that's who they are and that they can bring it to a new situation?
Yeah.
Your next point, 2 ears, 1 mouth, and this is, I think, just another good thing for coaching in general. But how does that apply more so here in our current situation?
When people are working from home, it's a cheesy saying: if you have two ears and 1 mouth, and use them in that proportion. And what I mean by that is that they value psychological support. Now, that doesn't mean that we're psychotherapists, and it doesn't mean that we're there to give them psychological intervention. But what it does mean is that we're able to hear, we're able to acknowledge, we're able to reflect, we're able to build context and understanding to help them to gain clarity around the current situation and stay committed to the things that are important. Because again, they don't have the prevailing tide or the prevailing current of their office and other people in the office to keep them engaged with the mission or keep them engaged with the objectives of the organization. So therefore, I can be there to help to remind them of why they're doing the things that they're doing. And some people are in crisis management right now. They're having to furlough staff. They don't know whether their business is still going to exist at the back of this. And they need to be there as a leader, and they need to portray some degree of certainty and resilience. And that has a cost and a weight on them. So therefore, we can be there to be able to share some of the things that they can't share with anyone else.
I think that points out the importance of active listening more than normal. That's probably one of the top skills of a good coach, is a good active listener. This is such a great time. I've talked to a number of coaches whose businesses are doing really well right now, and a lot of coaches who are being called on by clients to do additional work or even just like pop-in work to kind of help them stay sane in this time period, or past clients. So this is actually, coaching is such a great resource to be used right now.
Yeah.
Your next point was about context. So maybe you can talk about that. Explain that.
One of the points that they make when you have coaching relationships is that they say that you don't need context. So you don't need to have a really broad understanding of that person's situation in order to be able to serve them in some way. However, when you're working with somebody for 3 months, 6 months, or maybe a year, you're meeting with them every week or every 2 weeks, it's really helpful and really powerful to help them build context over time. So what that basically might mean is that you understand the objectives of the organization through, what you hear from them, and you build that picture for them, and you're able to understand their team dynamics. You're able to understand people's names, their family, and how all of those pieces of the puzzle fit together, so that over time you gradually create understanding, and then you're able to create interconnectedness and relationships between different concepts and help them to understand whether they are acting in line with the things that they want, in line with their values or not. And the deeper your understanding of their situation, the better able you are to do that. And you're able to then know whether they're doing things as they want to be doing them, or whether they're completely out of line with that and they need calling out on it.
What was going through my mind, I'm not a coach, so I think differently than most coaches, but I was drawing parallels to the video world, how right now building that context around people is very important. And so you may be seeing my pup in the background right now. I can't tell if she's cut off or not, but she was just having a dream and kind of chirping in the background. So, but I think now is a time that we can really, that people are craving human connection, and sharing a little bit more maybe personal details is helping people make that connection online. So I think that's equally true with coaching as with everything else that's going on right now, is that we might be able to use this time to get a better understanding of who the people we're coaching are, because we are seeing that 4-year-old and going like, oh, you never mentioned the 4-year-old before, but now I get how that could be part of your business and your what's going on in your professional life. So, but let's talk about getting drawn in, because that's something I think coaches usually are pretty good at, but this is a really challenging time, and it'd be pretty easy to get drawn into your client's situation.
Yeah, what I mean by don't get drawn in is that, don't buy into their stories. So they might have a story that it's impossible for them to do something now because they're at home. An example of that, there's a guy I work with who, has this story around not having any time to train or exercise, even though he's minus a 3-hour commute every day. So, and then, so if I buy into the story, then I believe that it's not possible for him to train every day. Whereas actually, upon further investigation, and bringing some curiosity to his idea that he doesn't have time, he realizes that actually, he's somewhat deceiving himself, and he really has 3 hours extra in the day, and all he needs to do is get up a bit earlier. Yes, it might be hot where he is during the day, but that doesn't mean that he can't get up early. So basically, don't buy into their stories. And another thing that I see less mature coaches do is they get drawn into the drama. So if their client's going through something emotional, then they feel emotionally drained afterwards. So if you're feeling emotionally drained after being there for somebody who's struggling, then you have to check your own boundaries, because it's really not our job to get drawn into what's going on for other people. And that's where our own psychological support and our own support mechanisms and coaching and other things come in to help us to be able to manage our state and keep that line between us and them, so that we don't get drawn in, so that we can serve them. It's really important for us to have a degree of distance in order to be able to maintain objectivity, so that we can serve them in a powerful way rather than being part of their drama.
Once again, I think a good point of how coach training has kind of led coaches to be so well equipped for this time period. So the last point that we had talked about was leading by example. So what do you mean by that?
I was speaking to a good friend of mine who is a coach, and he has been a coach for a number of years. He's a very successful podcaster. And his point was that if we can't be there to lead by example in challenging times and uncertainty like these, then really we're not practicing what we're learning. Like coaching is all about developing resilience. It's all about developing clarity. It's about understanding your values. It's about being able to maintain your state of mind and really helping clients to do the same thing. So you have to practice what you preach. You have to be able to maintain your own state. You have to be able to understand how to employ balancing practices in order to maintain your balance of mind so that you can really be there and be present with clients. And all the noise that gets created in your own mind, if you don't manage that and you're stressed, you're overwhelmed, you're frustrated, and you're bringing that to sessions, clients will feel it. They'll know it. So again, it's about that practice of really being able to step into presence for that person. And the better able you are to manage your own mindset, the easier it is to do that in a powerful way, and the more impact you'll have as a coach.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing all these tips and kind of giving us examples and leading by example here as a coach of sharing everything that people need right now. So, but let's I like on the back end of the interview to get to know you a little better. And so that is, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your coaching practice and Next Level Leader, and also how folks could get in touch with you if they'd like to continue the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd be delighted to see how I can be of support right now. My background was as a snowboard instructor, actually. I spent about 5 years traveling the world, and I coached a lot of people, but through snowboarding. And I realized that I really loved that moment where something clicks and people just get it, and they just something like a shift in their mindset or a shift in their beliefs about what they can do happens. And then just this like spark of joy or creativity arises. So I really enjoyed that. And then I spent 6 years working in financial services and didn't want to be a financial advisor. So I retrained as a coach in about 2015. And then since then, I set up my own private coaching practice, and I've done a lot of coaching, hundreds of hours of coaching, and coached all sorts of different people and honed in on the area of leadership and management. And now that's kind of like what I chose to specialize in. And I've had the privilege of working with, some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies up to kind of VP level. And I've just met some incredible people and had the opportunity to develop trust and really get a deep understanding of situations and circumstances that I never ever would have if I hadn't chose to do this job. And yeah, I love what I do.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that story. And so, how can folks get in touch with you? And I'm sure we'll have a link to your website down below. But what is your website?
The website is Next Level Leader, and it's about helping managers, directors, and VPs to reach the next level in their career, which right now is crisis management. To be quite honest with you, how can they get through the next month, 3 months? Most people's long-term strategies have become short-term strategies. So people can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to connect on LinkedIn and shoot me a message on there, or they can email me, dave@nextlevelleader.co.uk, and I'll be happy to have a conversation. If there's particular areas of this talk that have, jumped out to you that you'd like to know a little bit more about, I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing these tips, for taking a moment to kind of prepare your thoughts. We started this conversation on LinkedIn, and I thought, this is something that coaches need to know. So, and I also want to thank you for watching, and let me know if there's something that you're in need of right now that I can answer a question via video. I love helping coaches use video, but also just helping coaches be coaches. And I've got some other options here. Over here, you can subscribe to this channel to get more content. So be sure to click the little bell icon to get those notifications. And up here, I've got a couple other videos that you might be interested in watching. So I'll see you in the next video.